I'm a little sick, so you're probably going to see a few cuts where I'm like sniffling or sneezing. I'm going to edit those out. But let's dive into the Vulture class droid fighter squadron. The Vulture droids are for the Separatists. How can you tell? Well, to the left of their name, you'll see the big faction icon there for Separatists. Obviously, of course, there's some art there of them in a pitched battle. With the Vulture droids, again, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of their card, you'll see their little squadron icon there. Opposite corner is their point cost, 8 points. They are very similar to TIE fighters. You know, they're speed 4, 3 hull. Their anti-squadron armament, however, is 1 blue, 1 black, and their anti-ship armament is 1 red die. If you want to compare them with TIE fighters, I personally feel like that they are slightly better than TIE fighters if you are able to activate them to get their AI anti-squadron bonus, and we'll get into that in just 1 second. But if you are just want to compare stat for stat, they look worse than TIE fighters. But again, you have to take into account that TIE fighters just throw the blue dice, right? It's not always about more blue dice, because a blue dice with a squadron, it's only a 50-50 chance that you're going to get a hit, a hit symbol on that blue die, or, a 25% chance of rolling an accuracy symbol, which if you're not shooting a unique squadron, that doesn't do anything for you either. So look at the fact that the Vulture droids, they get a black die in their anti-squadron, which is a higher hit chance of rolling a hit, 75% chance to dealing damage. And this is where you can really see the power of Vulture droids compared to TIE fighters. And again, it comes down to their AI anti-squadron 1 bonus, which is while attacking a squadron, if you are activated by a squadron command, you may add 1 die to your attack pool of a color that is already in your attack pool. And then they also have the added benefit of having Swarm, which while attacking a squadron engaged with another squadron, you may reroll 1 die. So with this AI anti-squadron 1 bonus, so you roll your initial blue-black, because the AI squadron, it is an effect. It's a while attacking effect. You don't add it before you roll. It is an after you roll add effect. Okay, I've seen some people be like, oh yeah, so essentially it's like I'm getting 3 dice and I do it beforehand. It's like, nope, it's a while attacking. It's an add effect. It always happens after the dice roll. And this is important because if somehow you have to remove your 2 dice before you roll your attack pool, then you wouldn't roll your attack pool and the attack would stop. Okay? So you have to roll your blue black first and then decide which color you then want to add in after that. And it has to be a color already in the pool. So again, if there was like obstruction and you had to choose a die color to pull out, you can only add a die of the color that's in the pool. You can't say, like, for example, oh, there's a blue dice in my pool, but this guy would have thrown a black, so I'm going to add a black in. That's not how that works. You have to follow the card, you follow the instructions as it says. So for when you're attacking squadrons, where I love the flexibility. If I want, for example, if I'm attacking a unique squadron, there's a defense token I want to try to lock down. Like, for example, if it has scatter, I'll chuck in another blue die, see if I get that accuracy. Or if they have scatter and I don't care that they have scatter and I want them to spend the scatter so my follow-up attacks can get past it, I'll add in a black dice and see if I can roll, the two hits on a black die, or if I get really lucky, a hit on that blue die. It's 3 hits. Of course, they're going to scatter it. But now, as more attacks kind of pour in there, you can potentially overwhelm and break past those defensive tokens. So I really like the flexibility because, again, black dice are always going to be better against generic squadrons that have no defense tokens. Higher chance for more damage. This is better than a TIE fighter. But if I need the opportunity to roll an accuracy, add in that blue and see what pops up. I like the flexibility there, and that's kind of why I prefer them over TIE fighters, which just only throw blue dice. But Imperials have a lot of things going for them that unfortunately Separatists don't quite have right now, and that is synergy. TIE fighters at least get the benefit of like Howl Runner or some other squadrons kind of helping interact and make things a little bit better for them. Vulture droids really don't have a whole lot going for them right now, except for in one case, and we'll get to that. They're the only thing where they do perform worse than TIE fighters is their anti-squadron armament or the anti-ship armament. Because again, TIE fighters at least have a 50-50 chance of rolling 1 damage if they roll a hit icon. Vulture Droids, it's worse because they only have 3 icons that show hit symbols. Granted, one of those is a double hit, but again, it's still only 3 icons of a chance of a single damage compared to 4 with a blue die, so it is technically worse. Let's look at the first unique squadron for Vultures. We're going to look at DFS-311. If you look in front of their name, you'll see a little dot or bullet point signifies they are unique. You can only bring one of them. What's slightly different about DFS is that it has a red die instead of a blue die for its anti-squadron. It does have brace scatter. It is 18 points. That's quite a big, 10 more points over generic. You can bring 2 generics for 1 DFS. Why is that? Well, again, it comes with the Swarm. It comes with the AI Anti-Squadron 1. It comes with Intel, and its ability is while you're defending, if the attack is obstructed, you may force the attacker to reroll 1 die of your choice. Is that more beneficial than 2 Vulture Droids, though? I don't believe so. I think the Squadron is extremely overpriced for what it does. It's like, yeah, sure, it gives intel, but it's not. It's on such a low hull value. Yeah, you with its ability. So the ability is pretty much like you want to hide the Squadron in asteroid fields or behind ships. But then again, if it has to hide in an asteroid field and your squadron battle is taking place out in the open, it has to go out in the open to give the intel so that your squadrons can get grit. But the issue with Vulture Droids is that they don't care about getting grit because they want to be engaged in a squadron fight. So who's this benefiting? Hyena bombers? So if you're bringing hyena bombers, again, if they're getting tied up by something, how did you allow that to happen? It's one thing if a bunch of Speed 5 speedy boys jumped in, but usually, again, those are in pairs anyway, just to make sure that the bombers are really locked down. Sure, you could put DFS in there and then try to kill one, and then hopefully the rest can get out with grit. But it's still just kill the squadron, or I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of benefit to the squadron. Again, when you take into effect that its ability only works is if it's sitting in an obstacle, which is just anti-satanic. It wants to have intel, so it wants to be engaged with enemy squadrons, but oh no, it needs to be obstructed, which is unengaged. You don't have to be engaged for the intel to work. It's just really at odds of each other, these two abilities. It's great if it is in the middle of an asteroid field and the fight is raging around it and it's able to utilize its ability to help this try to stay a little bit safer. But at the end of the day, the squadron conflicts with things, and I've never seen DFS on a table. I don't think you ever will. It's just too expensive, and the abilities are at odds with each other. So I've seen one case where this has been useful, and I'll get into that about one of the other uses for Vulture Droids and like with Invisible Hand in a second. And the final, or no, there is one piece of clarification, and somebody asked, when does the reroll take place? So if DFS 311 is defending, the attack is obstructed, when does it force the attacker to reroll a die? Because some players were interpreting that as like, oh, I reroll your die right now. And the attacker's like, wait, what? It's my turn to do stuff. So it was clarified, the effect resolves during the spend defense token step. I know it doesn't exactly say it on the card, but that was the intent behind when it says while you are defending. It's still in the spend defense token steps, like everything else happens. There's never been a case where a defender can reach into the attacker's timing and mess with their dice before that they're done with it. It's always in the defender's step 4, that period. Okay, let's talk about Hardcell. So hold Charles, hold on, Hardcell. I don't know. Star Wars names are hard. These prototypes, they have the Anti-Squadron 1, they have Swarm, again, Brace, they have Scatter. 16 points, a bit more reasonable, with a slightly more useful ability. All the other stats are the same. Before an enemy ship or squadron at distance 1 moves, you may perform an attack against that ship or squadron even if you are engaged. So this is useful because this hero wants to get mixed up in the middle of fighting, which again, that's at odds with DFS, which wants your stuff to be able to get out of fighting. So they don't synergize together at all. So that's why you don't see them paired together at all. So Hardcell is great for throwing it in the middle of a squadron fight, but again, with no counter, if stuff just elects not to move away from you, they're just going to shoot it because it can't counter. So unless they don't move, it's not going to shoot them. Now, it is nice if your opponent elects to move, because then you can roll, if it's a squadron, that blue-black against them, which is nice. But again, it still suffers from the fact that if it's a ship that's moving away from it, it's still a red dice that has a 3 out of 8 chance of rolling damage. So that still is just really conflicting with itself, in that it doesn't have counter, so the squadron engaged with it don't care. They probably want to shoot it anyway. It's useful against bombers, I guess. It would be fantastic against TIE bombers, like everything is. But most other squadrons that are bombers have 2 to 3 dice that they can just chuck back at it and blow them up. So, I just don't understand some of these Vulture Droid abilities, and I wish that maybe a little bit more thought had been put into how they could synergize a little bit better together, because it doesn't seem like they're synergizing very well at all together. Okay. This doesn't have any clarification or errata or anything like that. Pretty straightforward squadron. For the one part I do want to point out, though, is that this squadron, this ability, does not work against one squadron in the game. And that's everyone's mischievous guy with a grin, Valen Rudor. He's a rude dude, because his ability is, while an enemy squadron is engaged with another squadron, it cannot attack you. So even though he's got this ability that says you may perform an attack against a squadron that moves if you are engaged, per Valen Rudor's the cannot overrides, right? So you still, even if Rudor moves away, unless it is literally the only squadron you are engaged with, if Rudor moves away, you can't shoot them, because the cannot is a more superior effect use and timing. Okay. So let's get into where, I like vultures, the basic vulture droids. Love the regular vulture droids. Not a big fan of the heroes at all. I don't ever bring them. They're too expensive. Let's look at one thing I like to do with Invisible Hand. And typically I'll try to bring Tri-Fighters of Invisible Hand, but I have seen in one instance where Hardcell with a bunch of Vulture Droids, what somebody has done is, because again, the Invisible Hand being just that donut makes it difficult to get him exactly where you want. But Invisible Hand doesn't have a restriction on when you're setting squadrons aside for it. They can be unique squadrons. So that's one nice thing, is that you can put unique squadrons aside for Invisible Hand. But again, the argument is just like, why not the Tri-Fighter Aces, which are so much better? But I've seen a case where somebody did chuck out, Hardcell, just to plop them into the middle of a bunch of squadrons, and then followed it up with some Vulture Droids, because they're cheap. And then they come out spitting all the dice, especially if you've got flight controllers on that Invisible Hand. So they come out spitting 4 dice at things, which, again, with these black dice in their pool, if they're coming out against like generic bombers or generic squadrons, they're throwing like 3 black dice, which is, or 2 black dice. Oh, that's right, because the Invisible Hand, it increases the AI value by 1. So yeah, they're coming out throwing 5 dice, 3 of those being black, and 2 of those being blue, which is just like, that is a road trip to Flavor Town and the amount of pain that they can dish out. So you can get a lot of value from Vulture Droids in this fashion due to that. But again, typically if I'm spending all these points and bringing flight controllers, Invisible Hand, and everything anyway, I want to bring Tri-Fighters, because it's still more dice and more. It's still essentially the same amount of black dice, but it's more punch for a few points more. But there's cases to be made for mixing and matching there. Anyway, that's the Vulture Droids. Not a whole lot else going on with them other than just basic fodder. They're best used when, of course, you're able to activate them and throw them into the fray. There are some synergies where I've seen some players use them with the absolutely terrible hyperwave signal boost. It's still a very difficult combo to get off, but I have seen some cases where some people will throw this card on their invisible hand, and the invisible hand then no longer worries about doing squadron commands because all of its squadrons should be in the middle of the fray with a bunch of enemy squadrons. It wants to do navigates. You want to use the hyperwave signal boost to activate the squadrons in the squadron phase. Again, but they have to survive to the squadron phase to do that. And kind of where some synergy that comes in with that is I have seen hyperwave signal boost, flight controllers, invisible hand, and I have seen, even though it's still it's a good card, but again you gotta really plan for it. TI-99. I've seen this combo with vultures just be absolutely devastating. Just wow, that can be a good combo. But again, now your Providence, which really wants to be killing ships, is purely kitted out for killing squadrons. Which hopefully, if you threw out all those Vulture Droids, hopefully you are having some kind of like Hyena bombers or something else backing your Providence up because you've spent a lot of your points, doing this hard hitting womp out. But that is one instance where I've seen something like that actually work out to really good effect. But in that situation, I then ask, again, why not try fighters? Because again, you can't put hyena bombers in there, or you can't put the Bella blobs. So I've seen some people try to put hyena bombers in Invisible Hand. And it's like, nope, can't do that. That would be great, but that would be really, really strong. Okay, I've gone on long enough. Appreciate you watching the video, and sorry for all the sniffling and coughing and the cuts, but we got through it, and I'll catch you next time.